Bride arrives drunk at the altar, and what the priest does is shocking. Jennifer Cooper staggered down the aisle of Sacred Heart Church in Denver, clutching a bottle of red wine and laughing uncontrollably as the guests whispered among themselves with disapproving looks. Her white wedding dress swayed with each unsteady step, and the veil meant to frame her face was crooked, revealing her messy brown hair. The wedding music stopped abruptly when Father Michael saw the scene. Instead of halting the ceremony or calling someone to remove her, he stepped down from the altar and walked straight to her. The murmurs ceased as he whispered something in her ear that made her freeze instantly, her eyes widening in surprise. "Jenny," murmured the priest, using the nickname only one person knew. "You've grown up, but you're still the same brave girl who helped me that day." Brandon Miller, the groom, watched it all with a pale face and clenched fists. Dressed in his impeccable black tuxedo, he couldn't comprehend what was happening. How did the priest know his bride by a nickname even he didn't know existed? "Father, are you all right?" Brandon asked, stepping closer. "She's clearly drunk. Maybe it's best to—" "No, my son," Father Michael interrupted, his blue eyes fixed on Jennifer. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. This young woman saved my life 30 years ago when I wasn't yet a priest." The murmurs returned in full force. Mrs. Barbara Miller, Brandon's mother, abruptly stood from the front row, her navy blue dress fluttering with indignation. "This is outrageous," she shouted, pointing at Jennifer. "My son cannot marry a drunk who makes up stories. I always knew she was no good." Jennifer tried to speak, but her words came out slurred. She shook her head, trying to gather her thoughts, when her legs gave way. Brandon caught her before she fell, smelling the strong scent of alcohol on her clothes. I need to tell the truth," Jennifer murmured, her green eyes filling with tears. "Brandon, I found out about—" But before she could finish, her eyes closed, and she fainted in the groom's arms. Silence filled the church, broken only by the muffled sobs of some older women. Father Michael gestured for them to take Jennifer to the sacristy. Brandon carried her, torn between public shame and genuine concern for his bride. A few older aunts followed, whispering prayers and shaking their heads in disapproval. Amanda Cooper, Jennifer's younger sister, approached Mrs. Barbara with a look of false concern. "Mrs. Barbara, I always tried to warn Brandon about my sister," she said, lowering her voice. "She's had these problems since she was a teenager. Maybe it's best to cancel everything before it turns into a bigger scandal." Melissa Parker, Jennifer's godmother and childhood best friend, overheard and stepped forward, her eyes blazing with anger. "Amanda Cooper, how dare you speak about your own sister like that?" Melissa shot back, her cheeks flushed with indignation. "Jennifer has never drunk in her life. Something is very wrong here." In the sacristy, Jennifer slowly began to wake up. Father Michael stood beside her, holding a glass of water, while Brandon paced nervously. "Father, please, explain what's going on," Brandon pleaded, running his hands through his dark hair. "How do you know Jennifer, and why is she like this?" Jennifer opened her eyes fully and sat up in the chair where they had placed her. To everyone's surprise, her voice came out clear and firm. "I'm not drunk, Brandon." "What do you mean you're not drunk?" Brandon stopped pacing, confused. "You were staggering, laughing with a bottle in your hand." "It was grape juice," revealed Jennifer, wiping away her tears. "I pretended to be drunk because I needed courage to do what I have to do. To tell the truth, I discovered." Father Michael nodded as if he had been expecting this confession. "What truth, Jennifer?" asked Brandon, sitting beside her. Jennifer took a deep breath and faced the man she loved. "Brandon, 3 days ago I found photos in your mother's room. Photos of you with another woman and 2 small children. A family you've been hiding in Aurora." The silence that followed was deafening. Brandon turned white as a sheet, but not from guilt, from sheer shock. "Jennifer, what are you talking about? What photos? What family?" He stood abruptly. "Are you crazy? I would never—" "I saw it, Brandon," Jennifer cried. "I saw you hugging a blonde woman, playing with 2 kids in the backyard of a house. The photos were hidden in your mother's drawer, along with addresses and bank deposit receipts." Father Michael watched the scene with a thoughtful expression. Something wasn't right. He had known Brandon since he was a boy when he attended the parish youth group. The young man had always been honest and straightforward. "My son," the priest said gently to Brandon, "can you explain these photos?" "Father, I swear on my father's memory, I don't know what she's talking about." Brandon knelt before Jennifer. "Sweetheart, are you sure of what you saw? Couldn't you have been mistaken?" At that moment, the sacristy door opened and Melissa rushed in, carrying a folder of documents. "Jennifer, I brought the photos," she announced breathlessly. "I managed to take them from Mrs. Barbara before she could hide them again." Melissa opened the folder and spread several photographs on the table. Brandon stepped closer and examined the images, his eyes widening in disbelief. "My God," he murmured, picking up one of the photos. "That's me, but I don't remember when this was taken. And I don't know this woman or these children." Father Michael took one of the photographs and studied it carefully. His years of observing people helped him notice details others missed. "This photo has been altered," he declared firmly. "Look here, at Brandon's shoulder line, and the lighting is different between him and the rest of the family." Jennifer looked more closely and began to see the inconsistencies the priest pointed out. "But who would do this?" she asked, confused. "And why?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Amanda entered the sacristy without knocking, tears in her eyes and her head bowed. "It was me," she confessed, barely able to look at her sister. "I faked the photos." Shock filled the room. Jennifer slowly stood, staring at her younger sister with a mix of pain and disbelief. "Amanda, why?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Because I've always been jealous of you," Amanda burst out. "You were always the perfect daughter, the one who got a good job, the one who found a decent man. I wanted you to hurt like I did when my engagement ended." Brandon clenched his fists, struggling to control his anger. "You nearly destroyed our lives out of jealousy," he asked, incredulous. "But there's more," said Father Michael, his voice grave. "Amanda, you said you've always been jealous of Jennifer, but jealous of what exactly? Is there something else you're not telling us?" Amanda began to sob harder. "Father, I can't say. Mom made me promise never to tell." "What promise?" Jennifer pressed, stepping closer to her sister. "Amanda, no more lies. What else are you hiding?" Before Amanda could answer, the door opened again, and Mrs. Barbara stormed in like a hurricane, followed by an elderly white-haired woman Jennifer didn't recognize. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" Mrs. Barbara shouted. "You promised you wouldn't say anything." "Mrs. Barbara," said Father Michael firmly, "I think it's time we all sat down and had an honest talk. This young woman deserves to know the truth about her family." The white-haired woman who had remained silent stepped forward. "I am Margaret Cooper," she said in a trembling voice. "Mother of the late Patricia Cooper, and grandmother to Jennifer and Amanda." Jennifer looked at the woman, confused. "Grandma Margaret, but you died when I was little. At least, that's what I was told." "I didn't die, my dear," replied Margaret, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "I was cast out of the family 30 years ago because of a secret that Mrs. Barbara here made sure to keep." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Brandon looked from one person to another, trying to piece together the connections forming before him. "What secret is this?" he asked, turning to his mother. "Mom, what do you have to do with Jennifer's family?" Mrs. Barbara grew visibly nervous, her hands shaking as she adjusted her purse. "Brandon, this isn't important right now. Let's leave and call off this wedding. This family is trouble. It always has been." "No!" Jennifer shouted, startling everyone with the strength in her voice. "I'm not leaving until I know the truth." She turned to Father Michael. "You said I saved your life 30 years ago. I was only 8 at the time. How is that possible?" Father Michael took a deep breath, as if preparing to reopen an old wound. 30 years ago, I wasn't a priest, Jennifer. I was a young engineer working on construction sites around the city. One day, I was inspecting the structure of an old bridge when it started to collapse. A little 8-year-old girl playing nearby shouted to warn me of the danger. Thanks to her cry, I got out in time. I remember, Jennifer exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with the memory. It was the bridge over the creek, near our old house. You were wearing a yellow hard hat. Exactly, the priest confirmed. After the accident, I had a spiritual crisis that led me to the seminary, but I never forgot the brave little girl who saved my life. When your mother, Patricia, came to see me before she passed, she told me everything. My mother came to you, Jennifer asked, surprised. When? She never told me. Margaret stepped closer to her granddaughter with hesitant steps. Your mother went to the priest 3 days before she left, because she discovered a terrible secret about your father, Jennifer. A secret that Mrs. Barbara here made sure to keep from you all these years. Mrs. Barbara turned even paler. Margaret, please, don't do this, not now. Now is exactly the time, the older woman shot back. My granddaughter has the right to know who her real father is. The silence that followed was so heavy you could hear every heartbeat in the room. Jennifer's legs trembled beneath her. My real father? She leaned against the table for support. But Mr. George was my father. He raised me since I was little. George was a wonderful father to you, Margaret said gently. But your biological father is someone else. Someone who is here today, in this church. Brandon held Jennifer's hand, feeling it shake. Who is it, Grandma? Jennifer asked, her voice breaking. Margaret looked straight at Mrs. Barbara. Jennifer's biological father is Richard Miller, Mrs. Barbara's late husband, and Brandon's father. The world seemed to stop. Jennifer felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. Brandon immediately let go of her hand, his eyes wide with horror. That means... Brandon couldn't finish. That you're half-siblings, Margaret finished, her voice heavy with sorrow. Richard had an affair with Patricia when Barbara was pregnant with Brandon. When he found out Patricia was expecting Jennifer, he tried to step up, but Barbara threatened to take everything from him if he left the family. Mrs. Barbara finally exploded. He was my husband. I wasn't going to let that woman destroy my family. So you chose to ruin an innocent child's life instead? Questioned Father Michael, his voice heavy with disappointment. Jennifer was in shock, silent tears streaming down her face. Brandon paced in circles, running his hands through his hair repeatedly. That's why you always hated me, Jennifer murmured, looking at Mrs. Barbara. That's why you never thought I was good enough for Brandon. You knew all along. I protected my family, Mrs. Barbara shouted, and I protected you too. Imagine the scandal if this had come out earlier. Amanda, who had remained silent during the revelations, finally spoke. I found out the truth by going through Mom's things after she passed. That's why I made the fake photos. I wanted to force you to end things before anyone found out, and you got married without knowing. You could have just told us the truth. Brandon shot back, exasperated. I tried, over and over, but you were so in love, you wouldn't listen to anything that could tear you apart. Father Michael stepped into the center of the group. I understand everyone is in shock, but there's something you need to know. Patricia came to me because she suspected the truth. She asked me to investigate discreetly. And what did you find? Jennifer asked, wiping her tears. I found out Richard legally registered you as his daughter at a courthouse in another town, without Barbara's knowledge. The document is kept in the church archives, along with a letter he wrote for you. The priest opened an old file and pulled out some yellowed papers. Richard came to me weeks before he passed. He had heart trouble and wanted everything documented in case something happened. He asked me to give this to you when the time was right. Jennifer received the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting was masculine and careful. My dear Jennifer, if you're reading this, it means the truth has finally come out. I want you to know you were the greatest joy of my life, even if I couldn't be there as I wished. Your half-brother Brandon has a good heart, just like you. I hope that when you learn the truth, you can find a way to be happy as siblings, not as husband and wife. Forgive your mother, Barbara. She acted out of fear and pain, not malice. And forgive me for not having the courage to publicly claim my fatherhood. You'll always be my daughter in my heart. With eternal love, your father, Richard. Silence filled the sacristy again. Jennifer folded the letter carefully, and held it to her heart. "Now I understand why I always felt so close to Brandon," she said, with a sad smile. "It wasn't romantic love, it was the pull of blood." Brandon slowly approached her. "Jennifer, I don't know what to say. All these years I thought I was loving my future wife, but I was really loving my sister." "And now," Jennifer asked, "what do we do with 200 guests at the church waiting for a wedding?" Melissa, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "I think you should tell everyone the truth. These people came here because they care about you. They deserve to know." "Melissa's right," Father Michael agreed. "The truth is always the best path, even when it hurts." Mrs. Barbara, who had stayed silent since the letter was read, finally spoke with a trembling voice. "Jennifer, I ask for your forgiveness. I carried this hatred for 30 years and made you pay for mistakes that weren't yours. You're a wonderful young woman, and you would have been a great daughter if I had allowed it." Jennifer looked at the woman who had rejected her for years and surprisingly felt compassion. "Mrs. Barbara, I understand your pain. It must have been terrible to discover your husband's betrayal while you were pregnant." "It was," admitted Barbara, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But that doesn't justify what I did to you. You were just an innocent child." Margaret approached her granddaughter and hugged her for the first time in decades. "My dear granddaughter, now you understand why I was cast out of the family. I knew the truth, and Barbara was afraid I would tell it." "Why didn't you reach out to me after I grew up?" Jennifer asked. "I tried many times, but your mother always said you didn't want to see me. Only now do I realize Barbara was manipulating the situation to keep the secret safe." Brandon, who had been silently processing everything, finally spoke. "I want everyone to know that even though I've discovered Jennifer is my sister, my feelings for her haven't diminished. They've just changed in nature. Now I understand. I always felt I needed to protect her, to care for her. It was a brotherly instinct, not romantic. And I always felt safe with you," Jennifer agreed, "like you were truly family." Father Michael smiled for the first time that turbulent day. "There's a beauty in all this, you know. You found and recognized each other without even knowing the blood connection. The heart knows the heart." Amanda, who had been leaning against the wall, stepped closer to her sister. "Jennifer, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness after everything I've done, but—" "Amanda," Jennifer interrupted, "you made mistakes, but I know you did it all because you were hurting. Now that we know the truth, we can start fresh as real sisters." The two embraced, and Amanda cried as she hadn't in years. "Now," said Melissa, ever practical, "what are we going to do about the party? There are 200 people waiting outside, a catered buffet, flowers, music." Brandon and Jennifer exchanged glances, and at the same time burst into laughter. It was a liberated laugh, the kind that comes when you finally understand the meaning of everything. "Let's throw a family reunion," Jennifer said. "A big family reunion that's been delayed for 30 years. And we'll tell everyone the truth," Brandon added. "I'm tired of living with secrets." Father Michael clapped his hands. "Then it's decided. We'll turn a wedding into a celebration of truth and forgiveness." They returned to the main church, where guests murmured speculations about what was happening. Some had already left, while others remained curious. Brandon stepped up to the altar and asked for everyone's attention. "Friends and family," he began, his voice echoing through the church. "I know you all expected a wedding today, but we've discovered something that changes everything." The murmurs fell completely silent. "Jennifer and I found out we're siblings, children of the same father, Richard Miller." A shocked silence filled the church, followed by gasps of surprise and hushed whispers. Jennifer joined Brandon at the altar. "I know this is hard to understand and accept," she said, "but we ask you to celebrate with us this family reunion that was kept from us for 30 years by secrets and hurt." An elderly woman in the third row stood up. "Young lady, I've been friends with your mother since we were girls. Patricia always suspected this truth, but never had the courage to confront anyone. She would be happy to know it's finally come to light." Others began speaking up, sharing memories and observations that now made sense in light of the revelation. Mr. Wilson, a longtime friend of Richard's, rose with difficulty. "Richard told me about Jennifer just days before he passed. He regretted not publicly acknowledging his fatherhood. I'm glad the truth is out. Father Michael took his place at the altar once again. My dear friends, today we won't be celebrating a wedding, but something even more precious, the reunion of a family torn apart by years of silence and resentment. We celebrate forgiveness, truth, and love in its purest form. The music began to play again, but this time it was a song of gratitude. Jennifer and Brandon walked down the aisle hand in hand, not as newlyweds, but as siblings who had finally found each other. Mrs. Barbara approached timidly. Jennifer, would you accept me as the mother-in-law I never was, but as your brother's mother? Jennifer embraced the woman who had rejected her for so long. Mrs. Barbara, I've always wanted a big family. Now I've discovered I always had one. The celebration that followed was unlike any wedding anyone had ever seen. Instead of wedding toasts, there were speeches about family and forgiveness. Instead of a first dance, Brandon danced with Jennifer in a sibling waltz, followed by Amanda and Margaret. Melissa took on the role of an impromptu MC. This celebration teaches us that sometimes love leads us down the most unexpected paths to bring us exactly where we need to be, she announced, moved. Throughout the party, many guests shared stories about Richard, painting the portrait of a good man who had made mistakes, but genuinely loved both of his families. Jennifer spoke with relatives she hadn't seen in years, now understanding why she had always felt out of place at family gatherings. She was the secret daughter, the one who couldn't be fully accepted because her existence represented a painful truth. Brandon, in turn, discovered that his father had left instructions about an inheritance meant to be shared with Jennifer when she turned 25. Mrs. Barbara had hidden those documents out of fear the truth would come out. Jennifer, Brandon said, handing her an old key. Dad left a house for you. It's small, but it's rightfully yours. Jennifer took the key with tears in her eyes. A home. He really wanted to take care of me, even if he couldn't acknowledge me publicly. Amanda approached her two sisters. Now she knew Jennifer was truly her half-sister as well, since Richard was father to both. Jennifer, I found more things in our attic. Letters Dad wrote to you but never sent. Birthday gifts he bought but couldn't give you. The revelation brought a fresh wave of emotion. Jennifer realized she had been loved her whole life without even knowing it. As the sun began to set, Father Michael gathered the immediate family at the empty altar. Jennifer, 30 years ago, you saved my life by shouting to warn me of danger, he said. Today, you saved this family by speaking the truth. Sometimes saving someone is simply having the courage to say what needs to be said. Margaret, who had stayed by her granddaughter's side all evening, finally spoke up. Jennifer, I'd like to propose something. How about we all move into the house your father left for you? You, me, and Amanda. 3 generations of Cooper women learning to live as a real family. Jennifer looked at Brandon, who smiled encouragingly. I think that's a wonderful idea, he said, and Mom and I would love to be close neighbors if you'll have us. After all, we're family now. Mrs. Barbara, transformed by the day's events, nodded eagerly. I'd love to get to know my real daughters, she said, looking at Jennifer and Amanda. I wasted 30 years being bitter. I don't want to lose another day. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing. 3 months after the revelation party, as it came to be known in the community, Jennifer was settling into the home she had inherited from her father. It was a simple yet cozy construction, with a backyard garden where Richard had planted red roses, one for each of Jennifer's birthdays he couldn't celebrate with her. Brandon visited almost daily, helping with renovations and discovering he had a sister with talents he'd never imagined. Jennifer was excellent at woodworking, a skill she'd taught herself that now made sense. It was a genetic inheritance from Richard, who also worked with his hands. You know, Jennifer, Brandon said as they painted Margaret's room, I always felt like something was missing in my life. Now I know what it was, a sister. And I always felt like I didn't fully belong anywhere, Jennifer replied. Now I understand why. I was split between 2 families without even knowing it. Amanda had completely transformed. The guilt of sabotaging her sister's happiness drove her to become the most dedicated person in the house. She cooked, cleaned, and cared for Margaret with a tenderness that surprised everyone. "Amanda," Jennifer said one day as they prepared lunch together, "you don't have to punish yourself forever. We all make mistakes." "I know," Amanda answered, seasoning the beans, "but now I want to do everything right. I want to be the sister you deserve." Mrs. Barbara Miller had also become a constant presence in the house. At first shy and awkward, she gradually found her place as the matriarch she was always meant to be. "Jennifer," she said one day while they gardened together, "I'd like to tell you about the day you were born." Jennifer stopped digging and looked at the woman she now considered a second mother. "Richard stood outside the hospital for 3 days, too afraid to go in," Barbara continued. "He wanted to meet you, but he knew it would complicate everything. When he finally saw you in the nursery, he cried like a child." "Why are you telling me this now?" Jennifer asked, moved. "Because I want you to know you were always loved, even when it seemed like you weren't. And because I need to ask for your forgiveness every day until you believe my regret is sincere." Jennifer hugged Barbara, feeling for the first time the maternal warmth she'd always longed for. "Mrs. Barbara, can I call you Mom, Barbara?" she asked timidly. Barbara began to cry, holding Jennifer tightly. "I'd love that, my daughter, I'd love that." The house was becoming a gathering place for the entire extended family. On Sundays, distant cousins who'd lost touch began showing up, curious about the story that had become legend in town. Father Michael was a frequent visitor, always bringing some story about Richard shared by a parishioner. "Did you know your father anonymously donated to struggling families every Christmas?" he shared during a Sunday lunch. "He said he had 2 daughters and wanted other children to have reasons to smile too." Brandon discovered he'd inherited not just a sibling, but an entire network of people Richard had helped over the years: street vendors who'd received interest-free loans, families assisted with rent in hard times, children given school supplies anonymously. "Our father was better than we realized," Brandon told Jennifer one evening as they sorted through old documents. "He made a mistake, but he spent his life making up for it by helping others. Maybe that's why we found each other," Jennifer reflected, "to continue the work he started." That conversation planted a seed that bloomed in the following weeks. Jennifer and Brandon decided to create a small foundation in Richard's memory, dedicated to helping families in difficult situations. Amanda suggested using the house as the foundation's headquarters, converting the basement into a meeting and service space. "That way the house will always be full of life and joy," she said. "Just like Dad would have wanted." Margaret, despite her advanced age, became the family's official storyteller. She remembered details about Richard, Patricia, and even Barbara that no one else knew. "You know, Barbara was always a good person," she said one afternoon while knitting in the backyard. "She only grew bitter because of the pain. When she was young, she was as cheerful and generous as you all." Barbara, who was watering the plants, stopped to listen. "Grandma Margaret, do you still remember what I was like before all this?" "Of course I do, dear. You sang in the church choir and always helped brides get ready. You were the kindest young woman in the community." Barbara smiled for the first time in decades with genuine joy. "I'd forgotten about that," she admitted. "Maybe it's time to start singing again." And that's how Barbara returned to the church choir, this time singing not out of obligation, but with true joy. Her voice, though more mature, still carried the sweetness that had enchanted Richard decades ago. Melissa remained Jennifer's best friend, but now shared that role with Amanda. The 3 women formed an inseparable trio, always involved in some community project. "You know, Jennifer," Melissa said one day while preparing food baskets to distribute, "I always knew there was something special about you. Now I understand what it was. You carried the love of 2 families in your heart." The foundation grew quickly. People who had been helped by Richard came forward offering volunteer work. Local merchants donated supplies and food. Within a few months, the small house became an informal community center. Brandon left his job at a big company to dedicate himself fully to the foundation. Jennifer used her administrative skills to organize the processes, and Amanda discovered a natural talent for working with the families they served. "You know," Father Michael said during the official inauguration of the Richard Miller Foundation. "I believe God had a plan when He allowed Jennifer to scream and save me 30 years ago. He was planting the seed for this moment." 6 months after the big reveal party, the day arrived that would have been Jennifer and Brandon's first wedding anniversary. Instead of sadness, they decided to celebrate the first anniversary of their discovery as siblings. "Brandon," Jennifer said as they placed flowers on Richard's grave, "do you think our father would be proud of what we've built?" "I'm sure he would," Brandon replied, putting his arm around his sister's shoulders. "He always wanted us to be a united family." That day, the whole family gathered at the cemetery for a gratitude ceremony. Each person shared a positive memory of Richard, painting a loving portrait of a man who had made mistakes but had genuinely loved. Amanda read a letter she had written to the father she had never consciously known. "Dad, Richard, I know you couldn't be physically present in my life, but now I understand you were there in other ways. Every time Jennifer protected me when we were little, it was your fatherly love acting through her. Every time Mom spoke about honesty and hard work, it was your values being passed down. Thank you for giving us a family that, even when divided, always loved each other." The reading moved everyone, especially Barbara, who finally managed to fully forgive the husband who had passed away. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. A year after the big reveal party, life had settled into a new normal full of love and purpose. The Richard Miller Foundation had helped over 50 families and become a cornerstone of the community. Jennifer was in the garden, tending to the roses Richard had planted for her, when she received an unexpected visit. A young man around 20 years old, accompanied by a middle-aged woman, stopped in front of the gate. "Excuse me," the young man said timidly. "Are you Jennifer Cooper?" "I am," Jennifer replied, stepping closer. "How can I help you?" "My name is Tyler Johnson, and this is my mother, Susan," he said nervously. "We heard about the foundation you created in memory of Mr. Richard Miller." Jennifer invited them inside, serving coffee and homemade cookies that Amanda had prepared. "Mr. Richard was very important in our lives," Susan continued, her eyes glistening. "When Tyler was little and my husband passed away, we couldn't afford rent. Mr. Richard secretly paid for 6 months until I found a job. But that's not all," Tyler added. "He paid for my education all through high school. I graduated with a degree in business last month, and I'd like to offer my services to the foundation. For free, of course." Jennifer smiled, feeling once more the loving presence of the father she had come to know so late. "Tyler, we'd love to have you on the team, but I insist on paying you a fair wage. Dad always said that work gives a person dignity." That evening, during family dinner, Jennifer told them about the new volunteers. "You know," Brandon said, "sometimes I feel like Dad is orchestrating everything from above. The right person always shows up at the right time." "Maybe he is," Margaret agreed. "Or maybe it's just the good he planted coming back multiplied." Barbara, who now cooked with Amanda every night, raised her glass of juice. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, "to Richard, who taught us that true love sometimes takes decades to be understood. And to all of us, who had the courage to forgive and start anew." Everyone raised their glasses, and Jennifer felt a deep peace settle in her heart. 2 years later, the house had expanded. With the community's help, they built an annex that served as a daycare for the children of families supported by the foundation. Jennifer discovered she had a natural gift for teaching, specializing in adult literacy. Brandon met Heather, a social worker at the foundation, and they fell genuinely in love. Their relationship blossomed naturally, free from the complications of family secrets. "Jennifer," Brandon said one day, "I want to ask Heather to marry me, but I want your blessing first. After all, you're my big sister." "Brandon," Jennifer replied, hugging him, "you have my blessing and my joy. Heather is a wonderful woman, and you two complete each other. And you know what's most beautiful?" he added. "This time when I get married, you'll be there as my sister, in the place you always should have been." Amanda had also found her path. She enrolled in psychology courses and discovered a calling to help people who had endured family trauma. "I want to help other families find their truth before it's too late," she explained to Jennifer. "I want to spare others 30 years of separation like we went through." Margaret, despite being 85, became the beloved grandmother of all the children in the community. She told stories, taught knitting, and kept the family's memory alive for the new generations. Father Michael remained an important pillar for the family. He officiated Brandon and Heather's engagement and was preparing a special ceremony to bless the reunion of the entire blended family. "Jennifer," he said one day after Sunday service, "I have a confession to make. All these years, I prayed daily for God to find a way to bring this family back together. I never imagined it would be through a marriage that never happened." "Father," replied Jennifer, "perhaps it happened exactly as it should have. If Brandon and I had married without knowing the truth, imagine the suffering we would have caused later." 3 years after the revelation party, something no one expected occurred. A letter arrived addressed to the Richard Miller Foundation, sent from Chicago. Jennifer opened the envelope curiously and read it aloud to the family. "Dear members of the Richard Miller Foundation, my name is Dr. Robert Thompson, and I am an attorney specializing in estate law. I represent the family of Mrs. Hope Williams, aged 89, who passed away last month in Chicago. Mrs. Williams left a significant sum in her will to be donated to institutions that honor the memory of those who helped her during her lifetime. Through research, we discovered that Mr. Richard Miller assisted her family 40 years ago when her husband lost his job. I would like to schedule a visit to discuss the details of the donation, which will allow the foundation to significantly expand its activities. Sincerely, Dr. Robert Thompson." The silence that followed was broken by Brandon. 40 years. Dad was helping people long before I was even born. "And people still remember," added Amanda, moved. Mrs. Barbara wiped her tears with her apron. "Richard always said the good we do is never lost. Now I see he was right." Mrs. Williams' donation allowed the foundation to build a community school and expand the daycare program. Jennifer was invited to lead the educational project, and she accepted joyfully. On the day of the school's inauguration, the entire community gathered. Jennifer spoke on behalf of the family. "This school represents more than education. It stands as proof that love and kindness multiply through generations. My father, Richard Miller, planted seeds of generosity that continue to sprout decades after his passing. We are merely the gardeners tending to the harvest." Brandon, standing beside his fiancée Heather, watched his sister with pride. "Heather," he whispered, "now I understand why I fell for Jennifer at first. It wasn't romantic attraction. It was family recognition. My soul knew my sister before my mind understood." "And now?" Heather asked, smiling. "Now I'm sure I fell in love with you for the right reason, because you're my true soulmate," he replied, kissing her gently. Brandon and Heather's wedding took place 6 months later, in the same church where it had all begun. But this time, Jennifer was in the right place, in the front row as the groom's sister, beside Barbara, Amanda, and Margaret. Father Michael, now with a few more gray hairs, officiated the ceremony with deep emotion. "Brandon and Heather," he said, "you met through a foundation created in memory of a man who, despite his mistakes, taught us about the importance of family and forgiveness. May his example guide you always." Jennifer was the couple's matron of honor, a role she embraced with genuine joy. When it came time for the rings, she felt complete peace, knowing she was exactly where she belonged. During the reception, Jennifer danced with several guests, but the most special dance was with a white-haired gentleman who introduced himself as Dr. Jonathan Harris. "Miss Jennifer," he said as they waltzed slowly, "I was your father's doctor. I was with him in his final days." Jennifer listened intently. "He spoke of you until the end," the doctor continued. "He said his greatest happiness was knowing he had a brave daughter in the world, even if he couldn't be near her. Doctor, may I ask what he was thinking in his last moments?" "He asked me to promise that if anyone ever came looking, I would tell them he died thinking of both his families and wishing they would one day unite." "It seems your wish came true." That night, after all the guests had left, the family gathered at the foundation house for a quiet conversation. 5 years ago, said Jennifer, I thought I was about to marry the love of my life. Today, I know I found something much better, a complete and true family. And I, added Brandon, discovered that brotherly love is just as powerful as romantic love, only in a different way. Amanda, now a psychology graduate working with dysfunctional families, reflected, Our story has become an example for many families I counsel. It shows it's never too late to forgive and start over. Barbara, who had become the most beloved grandmother in the community, smiled. I spent half my life nurturing bitterness and the other half discovering joy. I can assure you, joy is much lighter to carry. Margaret, now 87 but still sharp and active, shared her thoughts. I lived to see my family reunited. Now I can go in peace, knowing love conquered pride. Grandma, don't talk like that, Jennifer protested. We still have many years together ahead. Maybe so, my dear, Margaret replied with a serene smile. But even if not, I know the family will stay united, and that's all a matriarch could wish for. 5 years after the revelation party, on the foundation's anniversary, an unexpected surprise arrived. A young woman around 25 appeared at the door, accompanied by an older man. Good afternoon, she said timidly. My name is Olivia Wilson, and this is my grandfather, Mr. George Cooper. Jennifer nearly fainted. Mr. George, the man she had always considered her father, was alive. Papa George, she whispered, barely believing her eyes. My dear daughter, the man said, tears in his eyes. I heard through acquaintances about everything that happened. I came to ask your forgiveness for disappearing when your mother passed. Jennifer rushed to embrace the man who had been her father during childhood. Why did you leave? She asked, crying. Because I learned the truth about your biological father just before Patricia passed, George explained. I thought you'd be happier without the confusion of two fathers, but I've regretted it every day since. Olivia stepped forward. Grandpa always talked about you, she told Jennifer. I'm his adopted daughter. He raised me after my parents died in an accident. He always said he had a dear daughter named Jennifer and that one day he'd bring me to meet her. The family, which had thought itself complete, gained 2 more members. George explained he had worked in various cities over the years, always keeping in touch with friends in Denver who updated him about Jennifer. When I heard you'd learned about Richard and the whole family was reunited, I knew it was time to return, he said. If you'll have me back. Papa George, Jennifer said, holding his hands, you'll always be my father in heart. Richard gave me life, but you gave me love and care when I needed it most. Brandon, Heather, Amanda, Barbara, and Margaret welcomed George and Olivia with pure joy. The house, already full of love, expanded once more to embrace the new family members. That evening, during the welcome dinner, Father Michael offered a special prayer. Lord, we thank you for showing us that families aren't defined by blood alone, but by bonds of love, forgiveness, and devotion. Bless this family, reunited through truth and still growing through love. George looked around the table, seeing faces he'd known when Jennifer was a child and new ones now part of the extended family. Jennifer, he said, when I left you with Patricia, I thought I was doing what was best for everyone. Now I see God had a greater plan. You not only found your biological family, but created a family of choice. Olivia, who had been shy at first, began opening up to her new family. Grandpa always told me family isn't about who you're born with, but who chooses to stay together, she said. Now I understand what he meant. The arrival of George and Olivia brought renewed energy to the foundation. George, who had worked for years as an accountant, volunteered to organize the institution's finances. Olivia, with her journalism degree, suggested creating a newsletter to keep the community informed about the foundation's activities. Richard Miller Foundation News became a highly anticipated monthly publication in the community. Olivia interviewed families served by the foundation, volunteers, and reported on the institution's positive impacts. 6 months after George and Olivia's arrival, Brandon and Heather announced they were expecting a baby. Jennifer, Brandon said, emotional. "You're going to be a real aunt now." "And what an honor," Jennifer replied, hugging the couple. "This baby will grow up surrounded by so much love, they won't know what to do with it all." Barbara, who had become something of a baby expert through her work at the Foundation's daycare, could hardly contain her excitement. "My first grandchild," she murmured. "Richard would be so happy." Margaret, despite her age, remained active and sharp, immediately starting to knit blankets and tiny clothes. "George," she said to her friend, "you and I are going to be the proudest grandparents this child has ever seen." "I couldn't agree more," George replied, already dreaming of the moments he'd share with his future grandchild. Heather's pregnancy was closely followed by the whole family. Jennifer and Amanda organized a baby shower that brought the entire community together. Father Michael offered special blessings, and Melissa coordinated a support network for when the baby arrived. "Heather," Jennifer said one day as they arranged the nursery, "this child is going to be born into the closest knit family there ever was. They'll grow up knowing true love overcomes any hardship. And they'll grow up hearing stories about their great-grandfather Richard," Heather added. "I want them to know the importance of kindness and generosity." 9 months later, Emma Miller Wilson was born. A little girl with big dark eyes like her father's, but a sweet smile that reminded everyone of Richard. Jennifer was the first to hold her niece, feeling an indescribable emotion. "Welcome to the craziest, most loving family in the world, Emma," she whispered to the baby. The Foundation's home filled with children's laughter and shared care. Everyone took turns looking after Emma, who grew up surrounded by grandparents, uncles, and aunts of all ages. When Emma turned 1, the family threw a celebration that lasted all day. Jennifer looked around and saw Barbara playing on the floor with her granddaughter, her wrinkles etched with constant smiles. Brandon and Heather dancing with Emma in their arms, radiating happiness. Amanda telling stories to the community children who had come to the party. George and Margaret sitting side by side, watching with pride the family they had helped build. Olivia documenting everything with her camera, creating memories for the future. Father Michael blessing the food and giving thanks for their blessings. Melissa organizing activities and keeping everyone engaged. Dozens of friends from the community celebrating together because they had all become extended family. In that moment, Jennifer felt Richard's presence stronger than ever. It was as if he were there, smiling to see his greatest wish fulfilled, his two families finally united and happy. The end of the story. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. Do you believe Jennifer made the right decision by forcing the truth to come out? And Brandon, how do you think he felt when he discovered he was about to marry his own sister? Share your honest opinion in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to like the video and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other thrilling stories like this one.